In 5.4, we will learn to complete the square. So what happens when we can't factor? Well, besides crying, what we can do is we can complete the square. Basically, completing the square is going to allow us to set up this equation right here, which can't be factored, to solve using square roots. And usually solving with square roots, you only have one variable. So we're going to have to set it up. We're going to have to manipulate this equation here into something where you have parentheses squared and that equals some kind of number. And that's not a hashtag, that's a number, okay? So we're going to parentheses squared, some kind of quantity squared, and we'll have a number inside. So that's what we're going to do here today. So let's take that unfactorable equation that we had on the last slide, x squared plus 12x minus 16 equals 0. And we're going to complete the square with it. Now there's a few steps with completing the square, so definitely take good notes and write down those steps if you're the type of person that likes steps. And the first thing we want to do is we want to have the x's on one side and the number on the other. And I like to leave a little space right here for this next step. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to take our b term, remember we have our a, b, and our c, ax squared plus bx plus c. We're going to take that b term, we're going to divide it by 2, and we're going to square that. Now both the 6 right here and the 36 right here are important numbers for this problem. The first one we're going to do is we're going to add the 36 to both sides. And yes, you have to add it to both sides. Remember, we got to keep things even here. Think of it as two siblings. If one gets, a cupcake one day, the other one's going to be jealous if they don't also get a cupcake. Alrighty. So now I have x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 52. What you may notice on the left-hand side here, on this left-hand side here, we have x squared plus 12x plus 36. That can be factored, and that is going to be factored into the form of x plus 6 squared equals 52. Okay, here we go. Now let's make sure we understand how this is able to be factored. If I were to set up that AM method, I want to multiply to that 36. I want to add to that 12, right? Well, 6 times 6 equals 36. 6 plus 6 equals 12. So I'm really going to have x plus 6 times x plus 6, which is just x plus 6 squared. So remember when I said this 6 right here is also important? Well, it's a positive 6. That means I'm going to have a positive 6 inside the parentheses when I factor this and I get it into the form x plus 6 squared. That is a pattern that you'll see that you can use to work a little bit quicker through this process. So right now I have x plus 6 squared. Let's write down a couple of the steps that we haven't written down yet. So we add our b over 2 squared to each side. In this case, it was 36 that we added to each side. Remember, we added this 36 here. All right, and then we're going to factor the left-hand side, and it's going to factor into the form a quantity squared. So x plus or x minus a number squared. Okay, excellent. Now the next thing we have, well, we saw these problems a few days ago. To get rid of the squared on this side here, we can just square root both sides. So let's square root both sides here. So I end up with x plus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 52. Now we have to think, can I simplify the square root of 52? Well, if I divide it by 4, I will be left with 13. So yes, I can. The square root of 4 is 2. So plus or minus 2 square root of 13. So you got to remember to simplify that square root of 52 or whatever square root you might have. And we still have x plus 6 on this side. Last thing I need to do is I subtract 6 from both sides. And I'm left with x equals negative 6 plus or minus 2 square root 13. So there's my exact answer. And yes, we need to be prepared to also give an approximate answer. So let's do that right now in our calculators. You're going to plug in negative 6 plus 2 root 13, and you're also going to have negative 6 minus 2 root 13. And that should get us our two approximate answers for x. So let's do that right now. The first one, I end up with 1 point, and when we do the nearest hundredth, so 2 decimal places, 2-1. We have a 1 after that one, so it just stays at 0.21. And then lastly, we have negative 13.21. And yeah, these decimals, you'll notice that the decimals usually end up being the same thing, and that will be common. All right, so there's our two approximate answers right here. Our exact answer is right over here. Well, there's two exact answers because you have -6 plus and -6 minus the 2 root 13. So there are two answers with this one, and there's two answers right here. So there are four answers that we have written down here. Now, each question may ask you for the exact, they might ask you for the approximate, they might ask you for both. So you need to be prepared with either one.